When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Columns YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be continuing our Maester conspiracy videos. You guys seem like you've really been liking them. I did a couple last week, so check those out if you have not already. They were talking about Summerhall and how the Maesters possibly could have started the lie that because of captivity, the dragons died out. And in this one, we're going to be continuing by talking about Robert's Rebellion. Were the Maesters directly involved with this, and was this the final dagger that eventually took the Targaryens out of power? But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow. If you feel that might like this content as well. And let's get into the video. So today's video, we are going to start out by quoting the book and talking about kind of where this conspiracy comes from and where we can start our evidence train and build from there. So this quote is going to come from Barbary Dustin when she is talking to Theon. And this is in relation to the Maesters, as there's a Maester at this point whispering in Bolton's ear. And Lady Dustin starts talking about, you know, their uses and how they kind of have the power over the Lord. So, into the quote we go. They heal, yes. I never said they were not subtle. They tend to us when we are sick and injured or distraught over the illness of a parent or a child. Whenever we are our weakest and most vulnerable, there they are. Sometimes they heal us and we are duly grateful. When they fail, they console us in our grief, and we are grateful for that as well. Out of gratitude, we give them a place beneath our roof and make them privy to all our shames and secrets, a part of every council. And before too long, the ruler has become the ruled. That was how it was with Lord Rickard Stark. Maester Wireless was his Grey Rat's name, and isn't it clever how the Maesters go by only one name, even those who had two when they first arrived at the Citadel? That way we cannot know who they truly are or where they come from. But if you are dogged enough, you can still find out. Before he forged his chain, Maester Wireless had been known as Wireless Flowers. Flowers, hill, rivers, snow. We give such names to base-born children to mark them for what they are. But they are always quick to shed them. Wireless Flowers had a Hightower girl for a mother and an Archmaester of the Citadel for a father, it was rumored. The Grey Rats are not as chaste as they would have us believe. Old Town Maesters are the worst of all. Once he forged his chain, his secret father and his friends wasted no time dispatching him to Winterfell to fill Lord Rickard's ears with poisoned words as sweet as honey. The Tully marriage was his notion, never doubt it. So what I want to tell you guys and what's important about this quote specifically is the idea that Rickard Stark was being manipulated by this Maester. So for you guys that don't know, Rickard Stark is actually Ned Stark's father. He would have been in charge of House Stark at the kind of beginning or right before Robert's Rebellion until he eventually dies. So what Lady Barbary Dustin is trying to suggest here is that Lord Stark, because of the Maesters, starts getting involved in Southern politics. And as we know, the Starks are not good at this, right? And where I think this conspiracy goes even more is the Maesters were setting up all of this kind of northern power to kind of align itself, right? If we look at what was going on here, and Aerys starts to become kind of very paranoid about this even more because of kind of Varys, and also this was happening. Rickard Stark was trying to gain power not only through the Tullys, but also through the Baratheons. And also, Ned and Robert were being fostered in the Vale. So if you look at it, 4 of the kingdoms were now basically banded together, right? And Jon Arryn became kind of a parent to these two, Robert and Ned. So you look at how quickly 4 of the kingdoms that quickly kind of are aligned together. And it makes you wonder if the Maesters were the ones that really were involved in Rickard making these deals and starting it all up with the Tullys and having Ned go to the south to be kind of a ward. It is interesting because that is some of the reasons why the Mad King kind of does what he does. And if you even look at Rickard Stark, they are very involved in the South, right? The tourney of Harrenhal, pretty much all of his children are there. It's very interesting the way we look at the Starks, where if you look at events or time periods like in Fire and Blood, the Starks are not really involved in the Southern politics, right? We don't see them too much. So it's very curious that we have this quote from Barbary Dustin that the Maester was in Rickard Stark's ear telling him to do these things, And we know he has motivations and ties to the High Towers and also the Archmaester of the Citadel. So a lot of interesting things happen where, if you guys have watched my past videos, I don't have enough time to be able to fully get into the history of how I think the High Towers and the Citadel are connected. This is very interesting because I am someone that believes at least the higher group of Archmaesters are working towards getting rid of magic and or the dragons, right? And they also are not too fond of the Targaryens because the Targaryens inherently bring magic, right? So I've talked about in past videos how their goal was to always get rid of the dragons, how they helped push along events like the Dance of Dragons, how they were even in power for a year during Aegon III's reign, and they kind of helped get rid of the dragons. I've talked about this in other videos, but getting into this subject as a whole, right? Let's think about some other things, right? Besides this growing force that was kind of like a Cold War type thing where these Northern Alliance was gaining power while the Targaryen kind of power at this point was waning a little bit, right? The Mad King was kind of destroying their allies. The Lannisters at this point, after Tywin and Aerys kind of have their breakup, it seems uncertain there. It's an interesting thing going on here, right? With the Greyjoys kind of being a wild card in this situation, it really sets up something to go wrong when the Maesters are pushing for these types of things. Now, let's even go towards the end of Robert's Rebellion, right? Who is the one that opens the gates, or has Aerys open the gates for Tywin? And that's Pycelle. Now, would Pycelle be more of a Lannister, Tywin guy? I think so. But I think there was also, he got basically what he wanted in 2 strokes, right? He knows about getting rid of the Targaryens and the downfall of the Targaryens, right? He also would have been a Maester during the time of Summerhall. So would this have been a situation where Pycelle's a big Tywin guy and he can get rid of Aerys, thus fulfilling getting rid of the Targaryens for good? I think there's 2 things going on there, right? Where it makes sense for both sides for Pycelle to do this. Again, I want to point out that I don't think Pycelle was completely on board with getting rid of the Targaryens. Like, I don't think that was his main motive. I think he had 2 main motivations going on here, right? You get rid of the Targaryens, which is what the Maesters want. And 2, or at least the Archmaesters anyway. And 2, you also let the Lannisters come into power, or at least, get some favor with Robert. It makes perfect sense. It fits both things that he would want. So the big question here that we have to ask ourselves is, do we think that the Maesters really were kind of in control of Lord Rickard Stark going south and making all these alliances and making this kind of Cold War type scenario start to build up? Because if you look at the beginning and the starting of Robert's Rebellion, it feels kind of a lot like World War One. If any of you guys are historians or anything like that, you guys kind of know that everybody was kind of building up their power, making alliances, and it was kind of a mutual thing where if you attacked one person, everybody would get involved. And that's kind of how it felt here, right? It felt like as soon as one thing happened, everything kind of fell apart. And there was a lot of tension during this time as well. So I think it makes a lot of sense in that regard. And let's not even forget here at the end of this video that there's a chance that we've talked about Ned and Ashara possibly having some sort of romance, that Ned in this situation could have also been trying to get the Danes into this alliance. So, and that's what I'm saying is that the northern forces, or the Riverlands, the Vale, all these kind of kingdoms in the north were gaining so much power and it just expanding their influence that was a threat to the Targaryen power, which eventually it just takes one little hiccup, just like in World War I, how that started, for everything to start happening. And that's what ends up happening, right? We have whether or not Rhaegar even really did kidnap Lyanna. That's what sparks the whole event. Even if it is, they were in love or whatever, it doesn't matter. It gets twisted into this thing that he abducted her, and that kickstarts the entire war. So that is kind of the whole thing where the Maesters may not have directly said, yes, we started it, but they put pieces in place for these things to happen. If you look at the Dance of the Dragons, I've talked about this a lot, if you look at the way the Maesters kind of set up things, how they say Laenar should be the guide for Rhaenyra to marry when they all know he's openly gay, basically. It's not even in the show where it's kind of being hidden. It's like everybody kind of knows. And it's the only candidate brought up about Rhaenyra. Or if we look at other events where they're trying to get rid of the dragons or things like that, Daemon is very much slandered quite a bit, even though we don't know much about any of these rumors that apparently go around. The show went a different route in House of the Dragon, where they made him kind of a villain. But very much there's a slander campaign, whereas in the book, I would say Rhaenyra and Daemon are very much, like, slandered quite a lot compared to the green side, which is kind of the opposite of House of the Dragon. It's very much, I feel like, in Fire and Blood, because of they are the Dragon Riders. They are the more chaotic of the two sides, and that is kind of what the Maesters do not like. So they get looked on less favorably than the Greens or the Hightowers because they were connected to Old Town. And you also look at how the Hightowers were connected with Old Town and the Maesters, and how they were trying to basically steal the crown, it almost feels like, and a lot of those ideas. So it kind of feels like a repeat of history almost, right? So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about the Maesters and their involvement in the Maester conspiracy. I don't know. I mean, I think this is the one you have to stretch the most out of all of the ones I've done. But I still think it's very plausible. I think the Maesters, at least to some degree, had some influence over things that were going on. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.